Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. Very happy to have on the program today via Zoom, Caitlin Sutherland, the Executive Director of Americans for Public Trust. Great to have you on the program. I have to say that going all the way back to when you testified about foreign funds and why they should be outlawed state to state, not only in Ohio, you testified all the way back in February, and I have to give you credit. You saw it coming, and I'm referring to the $25 million campaign filing from last week by what we like to call political outcomes over people, but it's the citizens, not politicians campaign. Caitlin, here's what you had to say.
The same group that has received almost $250 million from a foreign national has turned around and spent over $14 million right here in Ohio. And there's more spending to come. Citizens Not Politicians, an ironic name given the ties to foreign funds, is currently collecting signatures in Ohio. Given their deep pockets, we can expect even more backing to come from 1630 Fund. This pipeline of foreign cash into Ohio politics should be stopped. Foreign nationals are already banned from donating to candidates directly, so why should ballot issues be any different?
You called it. Thanks again for your time today. I mean, this is not something that's a one and done. This whole idea has continued to grow, and foreign funds, how big of a threat really are they to our American political system, not only at the federal level, but at the state level, which is really the fabric of our government?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for highlighting my testimony all the way back in February, because here we are in August, and since then, even more money from the foreign-backed 1630 Fund has come into Ohio. And you asked, how big of a problem is this? Well, as I said in my testimony, there's a glaring foreign influence loophole that says foreign nationals cannot give to candidates, they can't give to committees, they can't give to super PACs, but they can give to state ballot issues. That is a huge loophole that must be closed. All 50 states should do it. The federal level should do it. And Ohio took the lead, recognized the threat, and closed that loophole earlier this year.
And the Democrats like to say, and they really fought hard for the foreign campaign dollars, the foreign campaign influence. They said, you know, it's already illegal. It's not happening in Ohio, but we certainly found out that it was because the 1630 Fund, which is a fund that you've done a lot of research on, gave $6 million, 85% of the money for the so-called citizens campaign came from groups outside of Ohio, led by $6 million from the 1630 Fund. And Caitlin, it was very interesting that the very day that Governor DeWine called for the special session to address foreign funds in Ohio ballot campaigns, the 1630 Fund made that $6 million contribution. So it is happening.
Absolutely. So obviously, working to close this foreign influence loophole in Ohio is something that the state Senate saw the threat and took seriously and introduced legislation back in January. You know, they quickly passed legislation, and, you know, obviously it was tied up in the House. And I'm not sure if, you know, the 1630 Fund wasn't taking the threat of the passage of this legislation seriously. But when Governor DeWine rightly saw tying the two issues, getting President Biden on the ballot in Ohio and giving the state legislature an opportunity to ban this foreign cash into Ohio, the 1630 Fund immediately wrote a $6 million check the day that Governor DeWine called that special session. And it sure looks like they realized, oh my goodness, like this bill is happening, it's going to get signed into law. We have to figure out a way to get this cash into Ohio before it's illegal. And you're right, critics of the law are saying, oh, it's not happening, this isn't real, it's already illegal. And as I said, it's actually not illegal for the reason that ballot issues are not elections. You know, many people don't realize that ballot issues aren't elections, but yet they sure, you know, they're funded like elections and they have an opportunity to turn out the vote. But because they're not regulated like elections, foreign nationals are perfectly allowed to donate directly and indirectly to these ballot issues.
Yeah, and isn't it interesting, too, that the $25 million was raised and then spent almost immediately within the last month, because the campaign filing came out and then their balance was zero. How troubling should that be to Ohio voters, regardless of where you stand on the political side, whether you stand to the left or stand to the right? How troubling should that be?
Well, public polling has been done by the Honest Elections Project in Ohio, and it found that the overwhelming majority of Ohioans believe that elections should be for US citizens. The notion that foreign nationals should be allowed to influence our elections, our state politics, is something that the left and the right, says that, hey, foreign nationals should not be able to do this. So it's actually not a partisan issue, it's a common sense issue. And here we have the 1630 Fund, who also counts a foreign national as one of their top donors. Sure looks like they are front loading the cash into Ohio before the law takes effect. It's incredibly concerning, and it does look like it's an attempt to evade the law.
In my column this week regarding this issue, I was making the point, most people thought that the Cold War was over back in the 80s with the fall of the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall. But now what we're really seeing is the start maybe of what I'm calling a foreign campaign cash Cold War, that it's crossing not only the United States border, but the border of almost every state, trying to influence and maybe undermine our system of government for progressive left, far left reasons. Why would Hans-Georg Weiss, who basically has started up the 1630 Fund with how much money, Caitlin? More than $250 million.
Yeah, it's around $250 million that we've been able to trace. His private donations will be unable for us to trace, but through his foundations, it's at least around $250 million and counting.
Why would Hans-Georg Weiss, I think I said Weiss, Hans-Georg Weiss, and George Soros and all of these foreign nationals, people who are not American citizens, why would they have any interest in the election system in the state of Ohio?
You know what? That is a great question. And in regards to Hans-Georg Weiss, he's actually on record saying that he never felt the need to become an American citizen. So that's a very powerful thing to know, that he never felt the need, he doesn't want to. So it's not that there's some sort of barrier for him to become a US citizen. He's just never wanted to become a US citizen. And secondly, we get asked this question a lot. Why is this foreign national heavily funding the 1630 Fund that turns around and engages in all these sort of electoral issues across the United States? Well, we actually were able to obtain information on his intent. Hans-Georg Weiss, in his own words, said that it was his goal to reinterpret the American Constitution in the light of progressive causes. So we know his goal. It's to reinterpret the American Constitution. And one way to do that? Well, it's through influencing these state ballot issue campaigns, which in effect rewrite the state's constitution. So we know where his money is coming from, and we know what his goal is. And we know that the left is using these ballot issues to weaponize the vote and get them turned out in November.
And I made the point, too, that, well, if we're going to be accepting or trying to accept foreign campaign contributions, then these people are not a friend of the founding documents of not only the United States of America, but the Ohio Constitution for that matter, because we see the ballot initiatives, a revolving door of them attacking the Ohio Constitution. Why not then just accept money, as I said, the campaign finance Cold War, from countries or organizations that are seen to be an enemy of the United States? Why not take cash from Russia? Why not take cash from China? Why not take cash from North Korea? Because that would also be foreign funding, would it not?
Absolutely. And what you pointed out is obviously we have this example of a foreign national from Switzerland with his $250 million into the 1630 Fund, and the 1630 Fund turning around and spending it in Ohio. But it's important to know that, yes, this is just a single example. Because of this foreign influence loophole, there is nothing prohibiting someone from China, Russia, the Middle East from doing the same thing. Again, they can't give to candidates, so they can't write a check to Sherrod Brown, they can't write a check to Governor DeWine. But again, because of that loophole that thankfully Ohio has closed and every other state should do the same, they can give to and influence ballot issues. So you're absolutely right that yes, this foreign national from Switzerland is able to do this, but there is no law on the, particularly on the federal level and in most states that would prohibit someone from China from doing the same thing and taking advantage of these loopholes that exist in almost every other state.
And the federal elections made it really an imperative recommendation. I'm holding up the FEC memo that I'm sure you're well aware of, and I've talked about on the podcast before with President Huffman and Senator McCauley and Auditor Faber. But this came out December 7th of 2023, so just last December. And it says under Part 1, highest priority legislative recommendations. Point number 5, amend the foreign national prohibition to include state and local ballot initiatives, referenda, and recall elections. So even the FEC says, hey, states, this is coming your way and you need to clamp down on it right now.
Absolutely. And that's for the nonpartisan FEC. And so we have to also know that the federal level has also introduced legislation as well. Senator Haggerty has taken the lead in the Senate, as well as Chairman Stile in the House, to introduce legislation that would close these foreign influence loopholes. Because as we pointed out, these ballot issues are having such an impact on these states. And so it's not just Ohio. As I mentioned, the 1630 Fund has spent over $100 million on state ballot issues over the last couple of years. That's astounding. Just, north in Michigan, they've dumped over $30 million into Michigan. And now with that new campaign finance report that was just filed from Citizens Not Politicians, the total for Ohio cumulatively from the 1630 Fund, we're now up to over $20 million. They're actively spending in Nevada. They're actively spending in Missouri. They're actively spending in Nebraska. This is a huge threat, not just to Ohio, but to nearly every state as well.
And let me guess, not necessarily Democrat-run states all the time. Probably, would you say the majority of them have a majority Republican state or legislature or governor's office?
So a lot of times when you take a look at the states that they're targeting, they're one of two things. They're either going to be a very competitive presidential state, or they're going to have a competitive U.S. Senate seat. So for instance, we see 1630 spending and investing heavily in Montana, where there's currently a very competitive U.S. Senate race. We also see them investing in Nevada. Again, that's both. It's both a competitive presidential state and a competitive U.S. Senate seat as well. So what the left is hoping that when you put these issues on the ballot, that it is also going to turn out the vote for a very specific segment of the population that would also vote for further left individuals and causes.
You can also read Americans for Public Trust and Caitlin's investigation called Foreign Influence in State Ballot Issues by just going to their website, which is, what is your website, Caitlin?
Our website is americansforpublictrust.org.
americansforpublictrust.org. Right here, Michigan, Ohio, Colorado, Nebraska, Missouri, and Nevada, all part of your investigation. I guess one of the things, too, is you brought up how Senator Haggerty, a Republican from Tennessee, has sponsored the American Elections Act to try to clamp down on this very issue. The media seems to not want to report, or especially on the editorial side. Their legacy media did talk about the campaign finance report and how much of it, 85% of it here in Ohio, that was coming from out-of-state dark money groups. But there's sort of what I like to call a cognitive dissonance or a disconnect about, well, you can't prove that this money is coming from outside the United States, to which I've replied to at least one reporter, well, if it's coming from the 1630 Fund, it was originally founded by a citizen who is not an American citizen. He's a foreign national. He's a Swiss billionaire, not an American citizen, much less a citizen of the state of Ohio. So that by default, would you agree, means that this is foreign funds that is now being directed to an Ohio ballot issue?
Yeah, so obviously, I have followed along and, the pushback for Ohio taking the lead to ban foreign influence in Ohio. And when you say that there could even be pushback when, people take the lead on banning foreign funding in Ohio, it's sort of silly when you say it. And so, yes, I've been following the arguments against it. And as the legislative session went on, the pushback, in my opinion, got sillier and sillier and sillier, where folks were intent on not realizing, or at least not accepting, how clear the money path that the 1630 fund has received $250 million from a foreign national. That same group has turned around and spent in Ohio. And so that to me is very evident, coupled with the fact that before this was about to be banned, they front loaded the cash. So devil's advocate, let's say it's not happening. Shouldn't you ban it regardless? Don't you want to safeguard Ohio's constitution? And don't you want to take a stand and say that Ohio is not for sale for the highest bidder from a foreign country? Elections should be for US citizens. It's a very simple common sense measure. And we're so glad that Ohio implemented it.
Yeah, it kind of gets you beyond the reasonable doubt there, especially when you're talking about a fund that was established with more than $200 million right out of the box by somebody who is not a United States citizen. Mark Elias, who is basically the attorney for Eric Holder, the former U.S. Attorney General who runs the NDRC, the National Democratic Redistricting Campaign, immediately filed suit in federal court saying that House Bill 1, Ohio's ban that was passed during the special session on foreign contributions directed to ballot campaigns, was unconstitutional, a violation of the Voting Rights Act. I believe your organization filed an amicus brief or a friend of the court regarding that. It seems to me that as quickly as this lawsuit came in, that also should be getting people beyond a reasonable doubt that they knew that we had to spend the money immediately before the law actually takes effect in the 1st of September in Ohio. And that, and we're going to file a federal lawsuit as well, tipping our hand that, yeah, there's a good chance that at least the $6 million did come from outside of the United States.
Yeah, so one thing to also add is Mark Elias also represents Hans-Jörg Wyss. He is the same foreign national that we are talking about. He is their personal attorney. He also works for the 1630 Fund. So when you talk about the Elias Law Group and Mark Elias himself, that he is representing key groups and individuals that have an inherent interest in making sure that they have preserved the ability to keep the foreign dark money flowing into Ohio. And yes, my organization, Americans for Public Trust, submitted a joint brief with Honest Elections Project supporting HB1, saying that it is perfectly reasonable for Ohio to take a stand, much like the FEC encouraged states to do, and ban foreign nationals from directly and indirectly contributing to ballot issues. And also, Ohio is not alone. There are a couple other states that have similar laws. Colorado, for instance, also says that if you're a foreign national, you can't give in Colorado either. Washington has a similar law, Maryland. So Ohio is not alone in this issue for taking the step legislatively and saying, hey, we're going to close this loophole. And Mark Elias did not challenge those lawsuits. In fact, they've been, Colorado's has been there for over 20 years. So then you have to wonder, why is Ohio being challenged so quickly? And they've actually asked the court to make sure that this law does not go into effect before Ohio's election. They want to punt this into 2025. And I think that tells everyone that needs to know.
It certainly does. And I guess one of the things, too, that we heard excuse-wise about, well, it doesn't happen, it's already illegal, which we both know that that's not true. But it's just too hard to prove. You just can't prove that this is happening. And I guess my question is, well, how did they launder the dough then? Because there certainly is a paper trail that you've been able to follow and uncover some very interesting things about where the money actually goes. How do you actually follow the money in these foreign dark money cases?
Yeah. So we gather all this information from publicly available reports, specifically these groups' 990 forms. A 990 is a form that a nonprofit needs to file to the government. It's essentially a nonprofit's tax returns. So through that, we are able to see how much money is going out from those Hansjörg Wyss groups into the 1630 fund. So we basically trace how much money is going out, add it all up, and that's where we get around $250 million into the 1630 fund. Now, Hansjörg Wyss's money is going to a lot of other places. You just mentioned Eric Holder's redistricting group. It's going into there as well. It's also going to, the League of Conservation Voters, who's on the airways right now with a pro-climate message. His money is going to a lot of places, not just the 1630 fund. So that's why we're really encouraging the state and the federal level to really take a look at the laws that exist that are allowing for this foreign influence into our elections.
And Ohio's law definitely has some teeth. If you're found to be in violation of this law, there is a significant penalty. Not only does the money have to be refunded, but there's a penalty on top of that.
Absolutely. The law was crafted, and we're so proud that Ohio really took the lead. They have one of the strongest laws in the nation, which tells you everything to know. It's a strong law, which is why Mark Elias wants to challenge it. He wants to make sure that his client, the 1630 Fund, and his other client, Hansjörg Wyss, can make sure that the money can keep pouring into Ohio. So for the critics that say, oh, this isn't happening, this isn't a problem, well, why was the cash front loaded? And why are they suing over it? And why is there a group of individuals so insistent on preserving the ability for foreign nationals to influence Ohio? Again, it's very simple. Foreign nationals, they can't give to candidates. So why should ballot issues be treated any differently? It's actually very simple. And when you think about any pushback on it, you wonder why.
You know, one of the other things that I've been seeing and that we've written about on our online newsroom On the Record, the views the news excludes, is this dark money is also going to fund what we call, well, they like to call newsrooms, but they're only newsrooms. They're privately funded. The Hopewell Fund, for example, funds is the umbrella group that funds States Newsroom. And there is a States Newsroom branch that operates out of Columbus, Ohio, called the Capital Journal. So we're seeing in the vacuum of legacy media that continues to collapse across the country, we're seeing more of these privately funded by Arabella, by the Hopewell Fund. I'm sure this goes all the way back to some George Soros type of fund, or maybe even to the 1630, propping up a lot of these good government newsroom types, but really they come with a slant that matches exactly that progressive leftist agenda.
Absolutely. There's two main, quote unquote newsrooms out there. We've got Courier Newsroom and we've got States Newsroom. Folks should know that these are not newsrooms at all. They're really just, masquerading as these dark money groups. They're essentially propaganda. And what's interesting about States Newsroom, as you pointed out, yes, there is a group in Ohio, and you won't be surprised when I tell you this, but Hansjörg Wyss also funds the States Newsroom. So when you see political slant coming out of Ohio Capital Journal, and when you see that they're attacking Ohio for taking a stand and banning foreign money, and you see that slant, you also have to know, well, where are they getting funding for? Who is their benefactor? And when you find out that Hansjörg Wyss is funding States Newsroom in Ohio, which again is not a newsroom at all, you have to wonder, well, of course, they're writing negative articles about what Ohio did and what HB1 did, and of course, the intent of it. It's because they're funded by the same foreign national that this law is meant to outlaw.
In your organization, I know during your testimony before the committee last February, Senator Bill DeMora, who is a Democrat with the Ohio Senate, basically asked you, well, do you also investigate Republican candidates or conservative issues? And your answer was yes. You're not just pointing out and shedding light on progressive left initiatives that are funded by dollars coming from outside of the United States. You investigate all of it.
Absolutely. So, as a 501c3, we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that does shine a light on what the left and the right is doing. And yes, I had the opportunity to inform Senator DeMora of other, Republicans that we have filed a complaint against and shine, as far as unethical issues. As far as tracing foreign dollars on the right, let me tell you, we have been unable to find it because the top two 501c4s on the right in Washington, D.C., actually have a ban on accepting foreign money. The top 501c4 on the right is a group called One Nation. And the number two group, and when I say, top group is how much dollars they're spending, is a group called the American Action Network. Both of those groups actually have an internal ban on accepting foreign money, which means they are choosing to say we are not accepting foreign money as a 501c4. The largest 501c4 on the left is the 1630 Fund, which, as we know, has no such prohibition and in fact seems more than welcome to accept foreign cash up to around $250 million. So yes, if that money was flowing on the right, I would be testifying in opposition to it as well. I don't think any party, the left or the right, should be the recipient of foreign dollars, but it's very interesting to know that the top spenders on the right don't accept foreign money, and the top spenders on the left do accept foreign money. So when you take a look about what happened in Ohio this year and how difficult it was to actually ban foreign dark money in ballot issues, it really makes you reflect on the whole start to finish of this process in Ohio.
Really, it's unlimited funding. It's an unlimited well of funding coming from outside the United States. Would you agree that the funding basically would be unlimited based on a lot of these billionaires who are not American citizens?
Yeah, currently, again, as the law is written, there's no cap on how much a foreign national can give to a 501c4. And there's also no cap on how much a foreign national can give directly or indirectly to a ballot issue. So yes, as the law is currently written on the federal level and in most states, it is literally unlimited. There is no cap.
Let me ask you this. So as I look at the big donations that were filed as part of the Citizens Not Politicians campaign finance report last week, led by the 1630 Fund out of DC, $6 million. Article 4 out of DC, $2 million. Our American Future, $1.5 million out of DC. The Tides Foundation, $2 million from San Francisco. The ACLU Foundation, $1 million out of New York. The Open Policy Center, $500,000 from DC, and Unite and Renew Fund, $500,000 out of DC. How troublesome should just dark money be to Joe voter in Ohio or whatever state that they're living in? I mean, is there a way to figure out where they are getting their funds from, or what's your message on dark money in general? Because, of course, Citizens United, the U.S. Supreme Court case, did set a standard about that.
Yeah, so when we talk about as far as outside money coming into Ohio, I think it's really important to continue this education on foreign dark money, because again, that is the clearest loophole that individuals can take action and close. As I said, you can't give to candidates, you can't give to super PACs, but if you can give to ballot issues, and like you just said, they are just spending millions and millions of dollars. I mean, I don't live in Ohio, but I've spoken to people in Ohio that say that your airways are just constantly being blanketed from, these groups, particularly Citizens Not Politicians. And when you find out that a huge chunk of this money is coming from foreign sources, we're so glad, again, that Ohio took action to close that loophole, because I do think people want to know where the money is coming from. And when you find that it can come from a foreign national, I know the law is about to go into effect, but we really hope that every other state hears this and really learns by what happened in Ohio and takes action themselves to close that foreign influence loophole.
Do you think that this battle against foreign funding will have to be won at the state level, state to state, or is it something that the federal government, with the Tennessee senator's legislation, where will it be won? Will it have to be won at the state level first and then on to the federal government, or can the federal government step in and say, we're just going to ban all this foreign money?
Well, certainly the federal government, can step in. As you said, the FEC did make that recommendation. But as we both know, the federal government does move a little bit slower than, other states. Ohio has a longer legislative session. So while we are very hopeful that legislation has been introduced in both chambers, neither of which have gotten a full floor vote yet. So really, states, should be the ones controlling their elections and controlling their politics. And I really think it should be incumbent on the states to take the lead and do what Ohio did and make sure that they're prohibiting direct and indirect foreign funds. So we saw what happened in Ohio. We saw that happen in Michigan. It's in Missouri. It's in Nevada. It's in Montana. It's in 25 states that we've been able to identify. And just because it's not coming into the other 25 states doesn't mean it's not smart to guard against it. So we're glad that Ohio has been the leader on this, and we hope that other states do follow suit, because I think a lot of change can happen more quickly and more efficiently, and honestly better when the state is in charge of making their own policies.
It used to be 10 years ago, and I spent 25 years in broadcast news, mainly covering Ohio politics. 14 or 15 years I spent covering the Ohio legislature itself. During those times, I would say, oh, this is just a big right-wing conspiracy theory. This is all conspiracy. Now, what I'm calling the foreign campaign cash Cold War is reality. I mean, it is happening. So your message about fighting this at the state level, because this is a republic, the Republic of the United States of America, where the federal government receives its power from the states, from the people through the states and up to the top. Your point is well taken about the states need to act right now because the federal government will be slow to act. Final thought from you, Caitlin, about what your message is to registered voters, regardless of what state you're in. You're seeing campaign ads, not only researching the topic that you may or may not be voting on, but should we also be taking a look, pulling up, because it's available online through the Secretary of State's website, about who is funding these campaigns?
Absolutely. Taking advantage of federal and state databases to see who's paying for television ads is a really great resource to make sure that you know where the message is coming from and what potentially is, their motivation. And what we've discovered in this instance is a motivation from a foreign national that says he wants to reinterpret the American Constitution. That's really important to know. So folks find that these television advertisements have any sort of ties to foreign sources. I really hope that they question the message and question the intent and are really empowered to do their own research. Much like folks should be empowered to do their own research on the candidates on the ballot, they also should feel empowered to do the research on ballot issues, and particularly who is funding them. And, as I testified back in February, Citizens Not Politicians, an ironic name given their ties to foreign cash, certainly makes you rethink what is going on in the Ohio airwaves.
And you can watch her testimony, excerpts of her testimony on our YouTube channel at Ohio Senate GOP. Caitlin Sutherland, the Executive Director of Americans for Public Trust, thanks so much for your time and your hard work. Great to see you.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.